he and I, it's hard to chart our course. We were together, not together. It was a long, messy process of sometimes together, sometimes I was pulling away because he got me so early. I had never dated boys.
I love that. He got me.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
This week on My SNL Story, our guest is Rosie Shuster. Not only is Rosie one of the original writers of Saturday Night Live, but she was there from the show's inception, actually before the show's inception.
Yes, good point.
Rosie's work on SNL has earned her 2 Emmys and 5 Emmy nominations.
Yeah, Rosie's responsible for the creation of some of the most iconic characters and sketches of the original era of SNL. The Bees, the Nerds, Uncle Roy. As we'll talk about, too, some of the first appearances of characters like Roseanne, Rosanna Dana, and Emily Latella. In addition to her work on the original era of SNL, she returned to the show twice. First in season 7, when Michael O'Donoghue returned to the show as head writer to start the Dick Ebersol era, and more notably season 12, after Lorne returned to the show to famously help Dana Carvey craft the church lady character.
Yeah, I guess before she came back and then after everything, she wrote on the Gilda Radner show and film, Gilda Live. She was nominated for an Emmy for her work on Lily and wrote on television shows Square Pegs and The Larry Sanders Show, one of my favorite shows.
Such a good show.
For which she got an Emmy nomination as a writer on The Larry Sanders Show.
Of course. We had a fantastic and really honest conversation with Rosie, talking about all 3 of her stints on SNL. She talks about what it was like during those early years and creating the show from the ground up, share stories about many of those famous sketches and characters we mentioned. And she speaks openly about things like working with John Belushi, being forced to put Garrett in drag, and how comedy from that era may or may not still work today.
Yeah, and I think you said it best when you said honest conversation. Rosie was so wonderful to talk to. She was very candid throughout the conversation. And I think it's really, if people have half as much fun listening to this as we had doing it, you're in for a treat because it's really a great conversation with Rosie. So enjoy the listen.
Yeah, this was a fun one. Rosie, thank you.
Hi, Brad. Okay.
Yeah, I'm so happy to finally get this set up.
I know.
Thanks for
You've
doing
been
it.
very patient.
No, Rosie, we're very excited to have you on and to talk to you. This is something we've wanted to do for a long time. So thank you for taking the time for us.
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to do it when I was semi-sane. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's when we wanted it to happen as well. So that's perfect. We're all aligned on that.
Good.
Works out well.
So important.
Rosie, we like to start this show with the same question for everyone. And although it might be a little different for you, the question is, when did you first hear about Saturday Night Live? Or maybe for you, what would become Saturday Night Live?
Well, what? When Lorne was talking in his sleep, you mean?
That's an answer we probably won't get again. There you go.
Well, it's been a roll, his rolling mission. A lot of it started in, my house growing up at 33 Riddell, because comedy was our happy place in my family. And we were all comedy nerds, and practitioners and whatever. At least my dad was. So, it all started there. And then I think it also, even though nobody ever says this, Lorne, came there when I was like a very emotionally immature 14 years old. And he got there 2 years before puberty. And he watched it feels like he watched a lot of the Ed Sullivan shows, which were comedy variety on the weekend live from New York. Hello, and they had the Beatles and Elvis. And so there are elements that have been rolling and incubating and marinating for a long, long time. And I put it all back there. He worked in, comedy, and I often worked with him. I helped him when he did sketches at Indian summer camp, with Jewish kids at Indian summer camp. And so it started there. And then at high school, he did stuff. And I always helped because that was my strong suit. I grew up in a house where we were always throwing lines. And that's how you got verbal airspace, was to say something compact and funny. So that just kind of was bundled in, that came with the territory for me. So the whole thing ultimately Dick Ebersol approached Lorne, and he and I, it's hard to chart our course. We were together, not together. It was a long, messy process of sometimes together, sometimes I was pulling away, because he got me so early. I had never dated boys. There was this summer of love. It was just,
he got me.
It was like I was so out of sync with the times. It sort of weighed on me. But I heard about it, and sometimes he worked in LA on his own, and then he came back and did Hart and Lorne shows, and I worked on some of those, and then I would work with him. I leaned on him for a job at Lily Tomlin.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be a series. So we worked for a while, we were stockpiling shows. It wasn't just one special, even though that's all ABC chose to do, because they decided she was an artist and that was a very bad thing. So for television, we'll have none of that. So when they made one of the specials and it was nominated, so that was fun. So I don't know. It was all incubating and rolling and marinating as from my perspective. I can't just, when Lorne finally came to meet Dick, I actually was in the back seat of his VW Super Beetle. And I was there sort of ambiguously. We didn't introduce me as Lorne's wife. I was just this chick in the back seat. And Dick was wondering if, this was a perk for him or something, It's just a little ambiguous. And I kind of played things very low. I wasn't a big hugging the spotlight person. I sort of had an inverse, regressed MO when it came to that stuff. That's why for so long there was never an article just on me, But so obviously we went to see Kentucky Fried Theater, and then there was a breakfast at some ungodly, brutal hour for Lorne. I think he stayed up all night and went in and passed the 2 suits, went to the next level. This was, I'm sure Herb Schlosser's brainchild, the Live from New York.
Yep.
On set, and the Johnny Carson looking for another. So the story. I don't need to fill you in on any of that. But it was always in the air. And this looked like, what strikes me so much about this point in time is music brilliantly reflected what was happening in the counterculture. There was the British invasion, there was the Stones, and there was the Beatles, and there was, the Doors from here. And there was just a lot incubating in the culture that reflected itself back to itself. And in movies, starting with some of the BBS movies and Bonnie Clyde and The Graduate and some stuff, it started to reflect the culture back to itself in a more edgy way than had the straight 50s or early 60s. But television was nowhere. It was like really staid and straight and square. And, the idea from the executives was where you're going into people's living room. You have to be nice and you have to be clean. It was a certain vibe that people, were living and breathing in the counterculture, just, thought they didn't, it began the thing of, I don't own a TV, as being a very noble intellectual thing to say and do. So that's all backstory to this beginning.
And that was one of the things I wanted to ask the beginning. Yeah, we've heard the story of kind of how the show did come to be, but I'm really curious. There's a part of the history that I've heard just a little bit about, that summer of 75, before the show goes on in October, when all the writers and everybody kind of got together in New York and just really tried figuring out what the show was like. I read a quote that you said once of everybody was kind of falling in love and trying to crack each other up.
That's very much my impression of it, because people are sort of scratching their turf and, staking out who they are and why. But it was the competitive stuff hadn't begun yet. It wasn't like ego posturing so much as it was at least wanting to delight everybody and being delighted to laugh. And there was just a lot of laughs and a lot of leaving the office and then going to Chinya or to some other, or just going different places with this group. And it was like a collective falling in love. I mean, the other crap would happen. It would come soon enough, but it began that way.
Right.
And Chevy was very dominant there because Michael O'Donoghue was very important, but he was quieter and he had these very set piece lines and attitudes. But Chevy was very spontaneous and funny in the moment. So he was getting a lot of laughs. He was doing a lot of, I met him online with Lauren to Filmex to see.
You were there. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've been sort of, airbrushed from the account, but I was there from a lot. I was there for a lot more of this than
I know the story you're going to say. I did not know you were there. Okay.
Yeah, I was way more there. It just, the price of being a girl, I don't know. It's just, that changed, obviously, for a lot of the women were very empowered, but we were still had inner glass ceilings back then, not just outer glass ceilings. You know what I mean? There weren't people who we'd seen do it yet. So it was a different ballgame.
Right.
Yeah.
And that summer starting out was just you and Ann Beath. There were only two of you on the writing staff, right? Just because Marilyn came later.
I first saw Ann in the office and she was sitting in a room full of guys, the comedy writers. And I walked in and she looked at me and she exclaimed, "Tits." Holy shit, I am so screwed. This is the this is my sister in arms. I am so screwed. That was her, her brand was edgy. She was like so edgy with Michael.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, we just tried to suss each other out. And some people were quieter and more writerly. Some were, dying to be performers. And the guys tended to be bolder in terms of like pitching ideas and that they could jump in your desk and act out all the parts, and I might just say a few lines quietly and hope they landed and they were funny enough for someone to say, yeah, write that up.
Right.
I mean, honestly, some of those dinners at Chinya that were a big group of people, Lauren was there and Michael and Chevy would, he'd drop his chopsticks on the way to grabbing somebody else's hot towel. He'd put it on his face and shriek blood, like this blood curdling shriek. He was just on a lot. He was still, I don't think he'd been hired as a performer yet. He was in a long process of trying to wear Lauren down by getting giant laugh, consensus laughs from everybody else. Yeah.
That's an amazingly important time in the creation of any show, really, is that lead up to it. And you guys were all kind of still rowing in the same direction and working collaboratively, right? So you said right.
And I was the only schlockmeister who had worked in television. They had all come, Michael and Ann had come from print. Right. Chevy had done different forms. I guess he'd done video and Ken Shapiro. He had written he had written on the Smothers Brothers.
Right.
Was trying to perform. Franken and Davis weren't quite so full of themselves yet. They were kind of there as a twofer and kind of just excited to be in the room at that same pretty much with Swibel, I think.
Right.
But it was a bright group of people and we were full of ourselves in terms of, revolutionaries. And, they had, you've heard, of course, the attitude was that TV was a lava lamp with sound.
Right.
It was strong attitude. And it seemed like everything written about us in the first year was like the inmates have taken over the asylum.
Sure.
There was a lot of that. Oh my God, who, and the 17th floor sort of was engulfed in a big pot stinky cloud. Most people smoked, which we thought was going to be our great advantage and was, except when it came to structuring and editing.
Right.
Great way out there ideas. So
then this group works together and you work all through the summer. And then come October, you finally get the first show on the air. Do you remember what that feeling was, what it was like for you to get your first piece on the air on the show and just all of that?
Well, New Dad was a commercial parody, so that wasn't live. Right. They put the little film in as they do with commercial parodies. It was really fun. It was something I had I had been a comedy writing team with Earl Pomerantz, who was the brother of Hart Pomerantz, who was hilarious in his own right and wrote Cosby and did all kinds of, had a big profile in Hollywood. And he and I been, the new dad idea had just been like a germ we had discussed once. So I just wrote it up because Earl chose not to come and work on the show. I'm sure Lauren offered him. That was great. I mean, I remember fussing a lot with trying to get the right sticker head. So when they say tops and pops, the new dad just covers the, it was hard to get props and everybody coordinated in that. Yeah. But it was a thrill. It was the first show.
Yeah.
It was great. Good laughs in the house.
You did have a live piece that first show.
I didn't want it to be on then.
Yeah.
Oh, I really didn't want
Really?
No, because Lauren and I had gone to England at one point and we saw Ian McNaughton was directing Monty Python. And I was still thinking about an edited show where you can chop up sort of a runner and it didn't have, it was more like not a shaggy dog, but the joke was that there was almost no joke. So when I realized it's in a live comedy show, they want hard laughs, I thought, no, don't do it. But Lauren fell in love with what I fell in love with, which was the potential of a bunch of disparate individual cast members all being, drawn together as a rep company, by virtue of the same ridiculous costume. And then Franny Lee put those, absurd boinging kind of antennae on. And that was really fun. But I didn't think the piece should have gone on the first live show. It didn't have that it wasn't written for hard laughs at all.
Right.
So I was kind of horrified, but then it became a joke piece and it set Belushi. Well, he already had a pre-existing grudge at Ann Beats because she was working on Twitter with Judy Belushi, which he didn't like,
Twitter,
Judy Jacqueline Belushi. And so he had a pre-existing animus towards Ann, which Don Novello just told me this last weekend. And Ann did finally let me know partly what the problem was. Way late.
Huh. Oh, so you weren't aware of it at the time then? Like when?
I didn't understand how bad it was when I read I looked at Daniel DeVise's book and I read Susan Morrison's book. I came to understand how huge it was. Maybe it's better I didn't understand the full, it was impossible to ignore after a certain point.
Right.
But it was ironic to me that Adopt a Belushi, which my brother and I wrote on a plane ride after Judy kicked him out because he,
right.
I swear I'm not doing coke, It's like, oh yeah, lick your nose and tell me that, your tongue will go numb, That's the only piece in a book on John Belushi. It's the only print piece included. Yet I was like the, taboo writer. So I thought that was ironic and satisfying.
Did I hear a story? You used to leave your initials off scripts so he wouldn't.
Oh yeah. Later. Jim Downey and I wrote a series of things called More Insects to Worry About and things like that. And Belushi loved being in it, and I left my initials off, and he got big, huge laughs for it. And then he went to Downey and said, "Write me another one." It's like, and
oh man,
yeah. So that was, it was just macho posturing. Yeah, and I played with my name sometimes too. No, it wasn't as the movie represents it. I think I used my name a few times because Lauren and I were staying married to get green cards. So that was more when the Michaels appeared. I was pretty much Shuster, unless I was occasionally something else.
Right. We do want to get into a bunch of the characters and stuff that you wrote, but we just want to do a fun little exercise for you because we've been going through the first 5 years of the show on our podcast here, and we're noticing the differences between the seasons. So if we could just get from you one word to describe each season for you.
Wow.
How it felt being there, what it was like for you. So and it doesn't, we don't need to put too much into this, just kind of rapid fire type thing. So season one.
Season one, it was just new and it felt revolutionary. It did, just getting some of what we got on.
Yeah. And season two?
Feverish, nonstop. It was feverish.
Yeah.
And it was also starting, reflections were slamming back at us. It was crazy how it, just caught on.
Oh, yeah.
You'd write a piece and then at the Korean supermarket, on Sunday, when you finally got up at 4:00, people were, going, never mind, or, just doing feeding back certain, it was wild.
Yeah. It all starts to kind of shift and become, it shifts for you guys, right? At that point, season 2.
The third year, it was sort of, I don't know if it was peaking. We were getting lots of hosts and we weren't completely, I don't know how to separate out I think we started writing a lot of nerds by the third season, I think.
Yeah.
Very nerdy. It was just like,
Yeah.
And then like the fourth season. So Danny that was when the Blues Brothers were starting to take off like crazy.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of extracurricular chasing concerts, and Gilda was doing her album during the fourth. It was exhausting. It was burnout. It was just a total burnout year. And then year 5, John and Danny left. Billy and Harry Shearer wasn't like a great fit. And I think he and Lauren loathed each other. And Brian Doyle Murray was there. I don't know. It's hard to say. It was just a lot of, Anne and I were like overworked like farm animals. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Because, Marilyn did Marilyn pieces and she was gone by then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It just got more and more crazy and frazzled and burned out, and with exhilarating peaks, like wild, crazy, exciting peaks. But it was hard. It was hard work. We didn't, there was no room for anything beyond that. Anne and I slept there at least 2 nights a week.
Oof.
Oh my God.
And we would always say, it's like we were always asked to service the girls, and strangely enough, Garrett Morris, because he's light in the show, put him in a dress. He hates being in a dress. It's demeaning. Put him in a dress. So sometimes we're not hacks. We're not going to do that. And I noticed in Susan Morrison's book, it reads that the girls love to put Garrett Morris in a dress, though Garrett found it demeaning. And I like, actually in real time, I did something I've never done. I felt the first tickle of a cold sore in rage at the untruthfulness of it, and it fully blossomed, and I got to wear it to the 50th anniversary. And that was just strictly the idea that we were the ones. I think Lauren wanted to protect his street cred with the Black community, because now there's more Black performers there. So that bothered me.
That's fair. Yeah. Absolutely.
Was there a point, or when was the point where you guys, I don't know if relaxed it's definitely not the right word, but you felt that you were okay, like the show was working, you're not going to get canceled and things are clicking? Like, was it the Emmys after that first season when you realized you guys
that was early? That was early. It was like such a hit. I don't think I had the anxiety early, in those first years about getting canceled. I mean, I think Lauren had to do some dances with the sponsors and the censors and with the suits upstairs and with the budget, because the show is pretty much always over budget. So he probably absorbed some certain kinds of headaches that we were pretty spared from.
Going back to the characters and the sketches that you're actually, before the characters and sketches you're known for, there's 2 very well-known characters from this era that started out in Rosie Shuster sketches.
Yeah.
Emily Latella shows up for the first time in a Looks at Books, and Rosanna Dana shows up at Hire the Incompetent.
That's right. I was like taking candy from a baby.
So my question is, like, how does not once but twice do those characters get taken and like run out of the stable from you?
Yeah, when I really realized what was happening, I was slow on the uptake, and then it was too late, because Gilda and Alan had a big bond. I mean, I did the first, I didn't do Looks at Books, and I don't think Alan did. It might have even, I don't know. But the first one I know is I did Emily Latella on Update with Chevy with Nevermind, the template of what it would be in the future for busting school children. And I think that was
Yeah. Okay.
That was the first one. Yeah, that character, and the character was based on Gilda's nanny growing up, Dibby, or housekeeper, or I forget. Maybe she was housekeeper, not a nanny. But they had a strong bond, and Gilda put her on the phone, and it was that she, she nailed the voice, and she was a sweet, kind of a little beclouded woman who just got things a little off. It gave you a piece of her mind until she understood that that's very different. Yeah, I did the template for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to see the Hire the Incompetent sketch, and you see it because there's no name. She doesn't have a
No, she's not. We fought for the wig, and usually, the comedy ethos of that show was you don't do funny costumes, you don't do funny names, you don't do funny wigs. But this character was so larger than life that Gilda and I had a long talk about it. She has to be this big a character, and Gilda needed that to go where she went with that character. And I did add the fixation with all things disgusting and gross. So I didn't do the template of Roseanne, I didn't do the one. Alan put it with Gilda on Update. I think they probably were writing a bunch of stuff together and they just rolled into it, and that's how it happened. And I was a bit of a timid soul in those, I didn't really stand my ground and say, what, give me that back to me. Cause it felt like it was very much Gilda and me, not, and I think Ann Beats wrote on the, hired the incompetent too by that point. I think it was by show 6, the Hard Hat with Lily show, that Lauren teamed me and Ann Beats up.
Okay. Cause
Anne hadn't worked in television, and I don't think she got anything on. And I was doing these crazy conceptual pieces, like Hollywood Bingo was crazy sad and slide into your slot stars. It was all, it was just like nutty. And Davey Wilson, the director, said, "Lauren, control your wife." Yeah, get the little woman under rein here. Rein her in. So then it was all right because I had wild ideas and funny dialogue, and Anne was good at structuring and sometimes good at editing. So that's how it came together.
Well, and that Hard Hat sketch is amazing, really.
That's a great sketch.
Even watching it now, all these years later, it plays so well. I mean, it's just brilliant.
The guys, nobody wants, Belushi, of course, but nobody wants to be the little piece of chicken that's so vulnerable walking along. It's like a very vulnerable thing. And it was not an uncommon female, experience. Yeah. And you didn't need a big, clever premise. All you needed to do was switch it. And it was funny. I think it was funny to boot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Lauren finally twisted Danny's arm to do it. Finally, he was a good sport about it. But that's not fun, that role,
right.
Sure. But I think what's so interesting is that Lorraine and Gilda, and especially those two, were put in that role in many different ways all the time.
Yeah. Sure.
And then just turning it back around was so, and I think Lily Tomlin was the right host for that sketch too. Like it just was perfect.
It was perfect. She was strong, and she can really give things a bite and definition. And they really had fun doing it.
Yeah.
Come do some squat jumps on my girder stud buttons, it's like,
yeah.
It's sort of fun to turn the tables.
Absolutely.
That was when the guys sometimes got so queasy. If the humor was based on female experience, sometimes the guys got really queasy.
Well, along that vein, there's 2 other great sketches of yours we should mention. One is The Pink Box with Gilda and Lorraine.
That was a woman's product, so personal. Even we don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Suddenly, I feel more confident.
Yeah,
I have it. I kept the prop. It was.
Oh,
I designed the prop. So yeah, it was just a rude pink tube with a rude black inverted triangle.
Yeah,
which is how it looked in those days. Before Brazilians, before someone decided that everybody's supposed to be nude.
Yeah.
And the other one I was going to mention was Mommy Beer Which we should say is actually the very last sketch of the first 5 years. It's the last sketch of the
Right.
season
I
5.
wanted them to drag a moose in, and big shotguns grunting and that. But guys used to, I don't know if you have them anymore, those brown beer bottles, and they would hold them with 2 hands and they would drink their beer like that. And it looked like a guy drinking from, a bottle. It looked like a baby with a bottle. So I put a nipple on it. And these guys got so queasy when they had to actually use the prop. It was like they almost dropped the bottle or their knees buckled or, it was really amusing to me.
One of your other characters that you got on and wrote into different sketches a lot was Colleen Fernman.
Oh, Colleen. Well, that began at Second City.
Okay.
Oh.
And I loved Colleen. I thought she was this game little soul who was really given a bad deal by nature. She was playing with very few cards. I thought she was a game little soul given her circumstances. So I was never laughing at her. I was like laughing at what she did with the little bit she had. She was mute, I did love this joke where, Lorraine is playing a child psychologist and she's like doing her Shirley Temple kind of character. And she's saying, go get him, there's a wall. And I guess it's Kate Jackson was the host. And I think it was her and Billy were the parents of Colleen. And it was like, go get a mommy doll. And she got a Barbie doll. And go get a daddy doll. And she got some version of a rugged Ken doll. And then they said, okay, Colleen, now go to the wall and get a Colleen doll. And she goes to the wall and she's standing there for a long time trying to figure, and then she gets a roll of clear Scotch tape. It was so absurd, but I thought she's trying, damn it, to express how it is to be her. But then later, I think someone had an autistic child and they thought people would be laughing at. So it was a taste thing.
Right.
So I would have been canceled. Those were canceled from reruns. It happened with Uncle Roy, too, understandably.
Yeah, that'd be another one. Yeah, Uncle Roy.
Yeah, Uncle Roy. I had a babysitter, Mr. Clark, when I was a kid. He was not pervy, but he had come from this giant Scottish family, and he was the troublemaker in the family. And I got just so fascinated with asking him, and what else did you do that was bad, Mr. Clark? And he would tell me this different mischief he would get into. And then he would tell me and then he'd get he'd get a caning. And I was just morbidly fascinated with that. So then Buck came and added his pervy,
That is Buck.
Je ne sais quoi. And all I can say in defense of that sketch, which of course got canceled, is they were thought crimes. The girls loved their Uncle Roy. He never harmed them physically in any way. They couldn't wait to see him again. So he was guilty for sure of thought crimes. But they were pretty, today we're going to go fishing in a glass bottom boat. And he'd get under the glass coffee table or, bring me your dirty, filthy things, or go deep sea fishing in Uncle Roy's pocket for a candy bar. So they're fishing around,
Yep.
so it's all in his head that he's getting his jollies. But, I get why you'd never see that today.
Yeah. Is that an example of sketches we've heard where the writers, you guys would have stuff and hold it until Buck shows up because you knew Buck could deliver something like that?
No, actually, Danny was very pissed off that I didn't save Uncle Roy for him, and it would have taken on a different characteristic. But
Sure.
That would have been.
But he was actually good with when with little girls, and apparently back in Second City he did stuff with Lisa. But he used to say the term Uncle Roy, so he was pissed that we didn't.
Wow.
That I didn't use him for that.
Interesting. That would have been a whole different.
Yeah.
take
That was
on
the
it.
other angle. Yeah, that happened too.
Where else do we want to go, Brad?
Well, you want to do nerds?
Oh yeah.
That was also based from, Anne was a nerd in her school, and I never called myself a nerd, though I was certainly dweeby, and I was bookish, so I kind of fit the bill, but I didn't present nerdly with I didn't have glasses then, or that I was farsighted, so I didn't need them for school. Because puberty came so late for me, and I had skipped, I got a lot of heckling, like whenever we would study underdeveloped countries, I felt like everybody in the class would stare at me. Or, I would hear things like, why don't you put, Band-Aids on those mosquito bites? I got like all the heckling that Todd finally did to Lisa Loopner.
Yeah.
So I was able to rage all the insults I absorbed growing up.
Wow.
Put them in. It was just really fun. It was really fun to write that.
And that's one you got to hold on to, because wasn't there a story like for the second outing of Nerds, Franken and Davis tried to get in there, and didn't they write one about like the yearbook or something?
And would never have let Swibel's bake off with both those things. She was.
Yeah, I remember the Franken and Davis piece.
Box. She had a healthy sense of entitlement, more than I had in those days. So, she disabused him of that idea that they were going to be writing Nerds.
Well, we mentioned the first thing you had on was a pre-tape, New Dad. You're also responsible for, I think, one of the best pre-tapes of the era with Hey You, right? With Gilda, and that's still a classic.
I kind of reverse engineered it because I was determined to be the first to put the walk of shame experience, on television.
Really?
Yeah, because she walks out the next morning in her cocktail dress with the tragedy mascara and the high heels.
That ending is amazing when she's hailing the cab. Oh, it's so good.
And so she was so great at playing poignant. Gilda could always find what was hilarious in what was pitiful. She was just brilliant at that. It was kind of Chaplin-esque talent that she had. So then it was just easy to think of this sleazy, kind of pickup bar, and just sort of overdressed to go to the bar in the first place. But, and Hey You, perfume for one night stands. Clearly it was an obvious cheap perfume, it's kind of a because like she walks by and everybody reacts a little bit to she's here now.
It's that's another one that's so smart. As you're watching, you're like, wait, what is going on? And then you put together the whole.
Until you hear the hook, it just sort of is what it is until you define what you just saw. And then I love that cut to the next morning of that hungover, raked over look.
Yeah. It's so good. Out on
pretty sure she's got a cigarette in her hand as she's waving the camera.
Yeah. Just like stay out. It reminds me of like John Candy in Second City did a Mr. Science, and clearly the kids were all excited in the morning. What are we going to do now, Mr. Science? And clearly the guy is like severely hungover. He's just, hey, we're going to make coffee, boys and girls. It just always stayed with me. It was so funny. Like, shut up. Like every noise was so painful.
Another great character that you had or that you created was Fred Garvin, male prostitute.
That was, first of all, it's such a Canadian character, like Daddy and I were Canadian. Daddy later said it was like a Canadian tire salesman or something, but he had that encyclopedic, memory that Danny had. But he started to dance. At that point, we were a couple, and Fred Garvin appeared on my bed doing erotic poses for me. So it was like, okay, you need to be on television. I felt like an entrepreneur finding Lana Turner in a sweater at Schwab's or something. It's like this. And I did the same thing also with his Norge repairman in the Nerds.
Yeah.
Long moon that Danny specially had. I just saw that and I went, this needs to go on TV. Yeah. And then Danny and I wrote Garvin together. And I think Downey came in at some point and worked on it too. That was really, really fun.
Well, at least you let him have that one. That was nice of you. You didn't give that one to Buck.
Yeah. And then Danny could, reel off all these different geographical locations that, at Bettendorf or something, he was really, he had an encyclopedic memory that he could just photograph.
Last one I wanted to bring up, because this is one of my favorites. You may not even remember this. It's so short and quick, but there's one called, with Gilda and Lorraine, Puppy Uppers, Doggy Downers.
Puppy Uppers and Doggy Downers. The biggest problem was, casting the right dog. I was imagining a big, dopey, goofy hound dog, humpy, a big, inappropriately humpy, goofy, big dog. Somehow they found this rat-faced, pointy-faced little miniature Doberman. And I said to Anne, who I think was producing the commercial, I said, you got to find a dog that humps. There are lots of dogs. There are dogs. There is such a thing. Just find a dog that humps. So she got this really sort of daunting looking little rat-faced Doberman miniature. And then it didn't hump. So Gilda, who was so game, she just jumped her leg up and down as if it was humping. But she was a trooper, Gilda.
I still quote that to this day. I'm taking my dog out and I see dogs like overly excited. I just look to my wife. I'm just like, just give that dog some doggy downers. I love it.
Yeah, I think the name Puppy Uppers just came to me one day, and then it, doggy downers, and then it kind of writes itself.
So season 5, you leave at the end of season 5 with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you want to go in order, Garrett? Because Rosie comes back twice.
Right. Yeah.
I came back briefly in the Dick years, and then I think I left. I wasn't there at the same time as Julia Louis-Dreyfus, so I don't remember what order. There's been 50 years. I don't have it all chronologically locked.
Well, luckily we do.
Yeah.
So you left season 5, and then you came back for season 7 when Michael comes back to work with. I guess Dick had taken over the show at that point.
Right. Yeah.
And you stayed for that whole season, even after Michael leaves / is fired, whatever.
He was fun.
That was so predictable. Michael had only gotten darker. And then now he was dealing with Dick Ebersol, who was doing the best he could, but just didn't have like strong comedy instincts. He was a sports guy, and he was an exec, or he could interface, maybe between executives and creatives, but not. He didn't have. And Michael was just getting darker and weirder and more. He was also sort of emotionally devolving a little bit by then. So it was really, I would have taken bets that was not going to last very long. And Michael, it wasn't Michael's funniest writing either.
Right.
Yeah. Michael
did some really sharp, brilliant things early on. And some of it was very dark. And, I liked some of it. I don't like just latently mean-spirited, because I don't like punching down, kind of humor. But Michael's stuff was very dark without always the virtue of being very funny.
So you do come back a second time in season 12. Once Lorne's back, he brings you back. Does he bring you back primarily for Church Lady and Dana?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think, wasn't Frank in there? Or there were some people there. Yeah, I worked on the Sweeney sisters there, I think, that year.
They're great.
Convinced them that no matter what medley they did, they always had to do Clang, Clang, Clang and the Trolley as the third song. It just always got this big laugh.
That's so good.
That's great.
Yeah. It was just, I'd heard a lot of Judy Garland medleys and stuff, and it was just such a trope that, it just had to be. And then Dana Carvey had this really brilliant audition tape, like none I'd ever seen, because he could do original characters and he could do impressions. And on the tape was the rudiments of the church lady with the the catchphrase, "Isn't that special?" And it was just hilarious. And it made me think, because she was so shaming, she liked to set people up to just that, or at least that was my instinct. And I said to Lorne, when I saw that character on the tape, I just said, it reminds me of Toronto, the tidy and tame, this part of Toronto was very, because I think of Canada as more super ego and the United States as more, ego and id,
right.
They're behaving true to their form. And so I just sort of free associated to Lorne about it. And so he sent Dana with me. And I think the first time Chris Durang was there too, because it must have been Sigourney Weaver must have hosted the show. and she brought Chris Durang, who's the playwright, to write. And so we concocted Satan, and, like it was really fun to write. And then I would always write them with him we did a lot of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was just fun to build someone up and then shame them mercilessly. We like ourselves, don't we? It was just, I just remembered that vibe from Toronto, not churchly, but just that personality type.
Rosie, just to jump back, you've hinted on it and joked about it a little bit, but I did want to give a chance to talk about it. That those first 5 years, just like how hard was it for the women on the show, especially the writers, to be there and get your stuff on?
The Belushi thing was really uncomfortable and awkward. Just to give you an off-center example of the attitude, each of the male cast members had a dressing room, and Gilda Jane Lorraine shared a dressing room.
Right.
Take that metaphor and just widen it out to the whole situation. That was how it was. Yeah, it was a pain in the ass. And also the point I sometimes like to make is that there were external glass ceilings where you could only go so far. But there was also a stronger program on individual women. Beats did better with it than I did. She was a toughie box in a certain way and used to pushing her way in a men's world. I was quieter and more soft-spoken. I tried to let the comedy I wrote do the talking, and, it wasn't always easy to get in the room. But it was a bummer. I didn't like it. And I had been caught up in the late 60s, early 70s. The feminist movement was very big in Toronto. And I had a lot of people look at my relationship and have a lot of ideas about it. And I kind of looked at things through another lens. I was never like a wimp or a pushover. And I always had a strong independent streak, but, it was shitty, some of it. I don't know how to laugh it off. It was creepy.
Yeah.
And I think we're going back to it now,
Yeah. Did you
we're going, racially especially, but I think it's going to get harder for women too. They're empowering bullies all the time.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
Right.
Minting new bullies every day.
Did you see progress when you went back to the show back in season 7 and then again in season 12?
Definitely women were starting to be more empowered and have less internal baggage that was conditioned, gender related conditioned baggage to work through. Yeah. I think Chan Hooks, who was quite a brilliant undersung performer, I think. She had some of her own internal boogeyman. Nora was stronger. I think she came from a big Catholic family and somehow she had more bravado. But as the women went over time, by Molly Shannon and then people like Tina and Amy, they'd seen it done, and they there were certain battles they didn't have to fight anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were early battles, and it was just to show up in the room and, hold your head up and do your best work. And, there was some stuff you couldn't affect and you did the best you could. Then later I would have people come to me and tell me, privately they love this or that or this, but not as a pack. The guys behave very differently en masse as they did as individuals. I had pretty good relationships with everybody, even at times with Belushi, at times would like massage my shoulders or, we'd laugh at something, it wasn't, but the mass of them, then they, it was, droit de seigneur or something, only with gender.
So we talked about a lot of characters that you did and sketches that you wrote. Are there any that you look back on and you're really proud of? I think, honestly, let me answer for you. And one thing and say is all of the work that you did in the circumstances that you just described, the amount of work that you output is remarkable and it's amazing. So starting there,
right.
was there, which sketches or characters are the ones that you're like, I'm really happy that I did that?
Well, we had so much fun doing Uncle Roy, even though it just seemed, I don't know. I mean, part of my mission statement seemed to be, it wasn't always the case, but to flirt with taboos. Like I had seen Richard Pryor once go in areas of racial tension that nobody had gone into, and he just shone a light and he owned it, and he was honest and real, and it was, for some reason, it came out very hysterically funny. So I was always really impressed by that. So I love the idea of flirting with taboos and shining a light, under rocks and weird dark place. It just pleased me, it just engaged me. It was fun writing the nerds just because of the relationship, following the vicissitudes of the relationship of Gilda and Billy, and how they performed on any show was such a mirror of where their personal relationship happened to be at that time. So it was really just fun to watch that. I liked the what you're calling the pink box, the women's products personal, because it just seemed like it went in an area that nobody had done. And it was the only time my father ever gave me a real compliment, because I think he couldn't figure out how I came up with it. So, it was just something in a million years. He could never figure out how I came up with it.
That had to be a big thing for you, coming from him. Wow.
Yeah, it was because
That's the only time. Jeez.
Yeah, it was the only time he really. Yeah, he was hard. He was tough.
We mentioned in the intro, a laundry list of credits aside from Saturday Night Live, including an Emmy nomination for probably one of the most well-known episodes of one of the best sitcoms ever, of the Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah, I love that show.
Was there anything, or what things did you take from your time at SNL that you carried throughout your career that you always would hang on?
A late night schedule. Learning how to produce your own piece, and that was a great thing, at SNL, is that we figured out the props and the costumes, or we collaborated with the department sometimes, or Alert Pook, we did the props, like I remember doing the thing for the ointment, the Omen, doing the little logo and that, and it was really fun to play with some of those other aspects of things. I used to sometimes write with Schiller, bad play. Well, I didn't do bad Playhouse, but there were some of the bads that I used to write with him, and they were really fun to write.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And actually with Downey writing, the more something, more insects to worry about. And we got so abstract and surreal with it that it was fun. That's what comes, that's what's coming to mind.
Rosie, thank you so much for talking to us. Can we throw two more questions at you real quick, kind of more modern day stuff? What'd you think about the movie, since, you actually were there that night? What'd you think about the Saturday Night movie?
First of all, it was like a psychic workout for me, because they put my doppelganger, Rachel Sennett, in this sort of bougie business casual. And I was like, what? Pleated trousers, it was just not it was not my image at all. And then they had the character fling herself at Danny Aykroyd under Lorne's nose on opening night. And that just seemed like such bad form and so gratuitously hurtful to, whatever the hell our relationship. And I never got together with him until the end of year 2. Mm-hmm. So it just bothered me. But other than that, I think they were, what goes on between Dress and Air is strictly which pieces are in, any internal trims, run to the actors, give them, it's just all nuts and bolts. It's this tiny compressed window in which so much happens. It's crazy. It's the most adrenal cortisol laden, hour. So this was like a fever dream, and it was kind of the spirit of the show without it being, being quite fictional. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I was the calm, still center in which all frazzled fragments harmoniously knit together. Thank you. I'll take it. But, you know, yeah. So I think he got something about the spirit of it. It's a Rorschach test. People love it. People hate it, and everything in between.
Yeah.
People bicker about the casting. They love the I heard everything.
Yeah.
Kind of like the show, kind of like the 50, the SNL fit. Do you hear consensus about what people made of the SNL 50?
Well, that was my second question was going to be, what do you think about the 50?
Well, it was a little filtered through something that really did piss me off later when I was alone of all the original creators of the show. I was exiled to Overflow, where there was not another single writer or cast member except for Mark McKinney, who did a vicious Lorne impression in Brain Candy. He played full pharmaceutical. So I didn't see all the people. It was a reunion. You have to get this gown and shoes and all. You have to turn it all out and buy plane tickets and an expensive hotel. And I never saw Jane Curtin. I never saw Franken. I only saw.
Oh my God.
I never saw Downey. I never saw any of the women hosts. So, that was not right. So I'm not the person to ask, because it really
that blows my mind.
I was grumpy, and I was trying to sit on it because I knew I'd see some people at the plaza later.
Right. But
then I just found some writers, and that was great. I mean, I found Schiller and Brian Doyle Murray, and then Don Novello came over, and then Billy Murray sat with me most of the night. And, so I had some people around me, but I never saw.
Oh, yeah, that sucks.
I mean, it started in my living room, as far as I'm concerned. The seeds and first roots and shoots of what it would become all started there, observing Ed Sullivan, observing my, like an ongoing comedy mentoring thing that I was very much involved in, not just a bump on the wall.
Yeah, completely.
I was in the room. We were. Yeah. It was a dynamic. So that just felt like shitty. I saw my pot dealer and his wife were in Studio 8H. I wanted to be in the room where it happened. So I'm grumpy.
Yeah.
Grumpy. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. It blows my mind.
Rightfully so.
That would happen.
Yeah. Well, that tells me a lot. That tells me a lot.
We're grumpy for you now.
And the guys, I think they realized, some of them, and they were very admiring of me. Zweibel brought up, he was like, I don't know if it was flattery or whatever the hell it was. He was very kind about my writing and chops and that. And he said, Franken and I both put your joke in our book. We were both falling, because I had this crazy joke that Franken put in his book. And then Zweibel did as well when his book came out.
What's the joke?
It was like a really, really bad Hanukkah gift for Anne Frank would be a drum set.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
It's just very dark. It's very dark. But that, so they fought over that. And then, I had a really nice time at the plaza, but I didn't see anybody, because once I found some people I wanted to spend time with, the din was loud, and it just was weird.
I'm sorry.
It was the one thing I did not like from the 50th, and I liked that they showed Schiller's reel, Don't Look Back in Anger, in full.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I know that, the show where Lorne doesn't like to do this, call attention and praise itself. But what I thought they should have done is, when they came back from that, to kind of your point of you being there, the one who started it, is everybody who was there that was there to start the show, all the writers, Howard Shore, you know, Schaefer, just should have been on stage
from 75. Who are still left on the side of the graph, and who are plenty enough to present.
And just have all you guys out there and come back from that short and just get a standing ovation.
Looking for, this cutaway to me. It's like, I wasn't in the room.
Yeah. Give some due to who the people who were involved, and everybody behind the scenes, everybody.
The original creators. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I would have loved to have seen.
My brother and I were in love with, before the show went on the air, we were in love with Don Pardo because whatever that quiz was, it Jeopardy, I don't know. Tell us what they won, Don Pardo. We used to walk around saying that all the time, and so I said, you got to get Don Pardo. So but there were a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Rosie, you'll never be left off of any anniversary party of ours. We will invite you every time.
No.
Okay.
It's just the two of us, but we're happy to hang out with you whenever. Yeah.
Anytime.
Okay.
Oh, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much. You don't know
Yeah.
how much this means. This is so great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for waiting. I know it was a long, slow slog
No.
It
to
was
get here, but
Well,
so worth it.
Yeah.
Like, not a problem.
That was an amazing conversation with Rosie Shuster.
Yeah.
I couldn't be happier with it.
Nope.
And again,
Until
she's
the end.
super, well, I appreciate her candor and her
I do
honesty.
too.
And I'm pissed off for her.
She's
to
a
be honest
bigger
with you.
person than I am. Like, I was riled up. I still riled up. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm talking to you, Ray Romano and Al Sharpton.
And Kevin Costner. Let's not
And
leave
that
him
little
out.
girl next to him from Scream, whatever her name is.
Jenna Ortega.
That's the one, yeah. I mean, listen, there's a list of people I could go through that are important to the show or not, but like, anyway.
Or
whatever.
not. Look,
I've said my
the
piece.
fact that she was there,
Yes.
like from Lauren's beginning, not even the show's beginning, but Lauren's beginning, and she gets shoved in Studio
I know.
8G.
Right.
That's, forgive my language, but that's fucked.
I agree. But I got to say, I mean, thank you, Rosie, for being honest, and
Yeah.
sharing that story. It wasn't good to hear, but I'm glad it's out there. People know. So anyway,
Yeah.
But regardless,
Well-
amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Rosie. It was so much fun to
Amazing.
talk to you.
It was great.
Hope you guys enjoyed it as well.
Yes. Next week, on the early years of SNL, we're back talking about season 4, episode 12, with host Rick Nelson and musical guest Judy Collins.
How many times? It's Ricky. It's Ricky Nelson. I've told you this
know.
before.
He's aged out of the Y. Now he's just Rick Nelson. Until then, good night and have
Good
a
night.
pleasant tomorrow.
And have a pleasant tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please take a moment to rate and review the project wherever you find us. You can also drop us a line to let us know what you liked or didn't and what else you might like to hear in the future at nr4ptproject@gmail.com. And lastly, you can find us on social media everywhere at nr4ptproject. Thanks again for listening. Have a pleasant tomorrow.